Good morning, good morning, good morning. My name is Paul, and I'm a full-blown alcoholic. And I was delighted to hear that train go by. I thought the one other time I talked here was the very first of these roundups, and I had the privilege of being the first speaker to have a freight train go through in the middle of his talk, and a very long freight train. A very short, a very slow freight train. Wasn't as bad as the time I was asked to talk at a fairground up in San Francisco. It was the first time there, too, and they were delighted that they had gotten it so cheaply. The rent was very cheap, and they were very pleased with that. And I was talking on a Saturday afternoon, and in the middle of my talk, we found out why it was cheap. They had an auto race going right around the thing. Vroom, vroom, vroom. It was kind of like a New Year's Eve event when I was talking, and right in the middle of my talk, on the paper-thin walls next door, a band started up with a dance next door, and all those things happen. It's good. It's good for me. It helps me maintain my humility. I'm basically very humble. I'm very proud of my humility. And I really am. I was introduced with somebody who gave me a slightly longer introduction, who commented on how humble I am. And I was very pleased that he said that. Because I'll tell you, there's just nothing that I know of, there's just nothing more boring than being humble and not having anybody notice it. It's just a real drag. And, anyway, isn't this a beautiful day to stay sober? And don't we have a beautiful way to stay sober? I'm very pleased with that. I want to thank Richard for inviting me, and anybody else who had anything to do with me being here today. And thank you for the basket of fruit and flowers. That was very nice. And a nice stay over at the Ramada Inn last night. A nice continental breakfast there. And had time to go out and have a nice brisk walk. And which is good for me. It's not quite as good as my time on my treadmill, but it's so awkward and cumbersome to bring a treadmill with you when you travel. And that's my that's my bragging story. It has nothing to do with AA, so if you're new, don't pay attention to what I'm saying right now. But my bragging story is that I am the only 80-year-old I know who has worn out his treadmill before it wore him out. 5 years ago, I bought a treadmill, and I'm not very keen on service contracts, but I thought with a treadmill, I think I'll get a service contract, and I did. And I wore out the tread, and they replaced it. And I wore out the main bearing, and they replaced it. And I wore out a third part, and they replaced it. After which the company that made the treadmill went out of business. But that didn't put my service contract out of business, to which I reminded them. So they said, well, you go back to Montgomery Ward and you pick out the best treadmill you can find. Let us know which one it is. We'll go pick it up and we'll deliver it. We'll pick up the old one and take it away. And I am now in the process of trying to wear out my second treadmill. And indeed, I intend to be doing that at least until July the 1st, 2002, because last week I sent in the money to renew my service contract for another 3 years. So when I'm at home, I spend 40 minutes on the treadmill at 3.6 miles per hour, and that's my own personal Prozac. I haven't had a good suicidal depression since I started doing that. And I love depression. I think that's my favorite mood, is to be depressed. And In fact, I think depression has a lot of redeeming social value because it takes all those problems, all of them, and narrows them all down to just me. Just me. Just me. And of course, for me, I have a little trouble deciding when I'm depressed and when I'm just wallowing in self-pity. But anyway, I love my treadmill, and I love the exercise, and it's good for me. And people have asked about Max. Max couldn't be with me. Max is for Maxine, and in case you don't know, and she has the flu or something, and she wasn't able to come with me last weekend when I went to San Antonio. She couldn't come. Almost came this week, but couldn't quite make it. And she wanted to tell you all she said hello. She's sorry she couldn't be here. And Max and I have been married now. This is our 60th year, and you're nowhere near as impressed as I am. I'm not even as impressed as Max is, you know. In fact, Max and I have known each other since we were 4 years old. And, as a matter of fact, Max and I, as I say, have been married 60 years now. And the sad part, in a sense, is that the young people of today just don't have what it takes to put together a relationship like Max and I have. They just don't have it. For one thing, you've got to be very, very old. But I guess the secret is don't divorce and don't die. And not drinking seems to help too. Anyhow, but as a matter of fact, on our last anniversary, on our 59th anniversary, Max and I made the mutual decision to make this, the 60th year, the best year of our marriage. And basically what that meant was, for one thing, we left all the past behind us. Just going to live a day at a time. No more of that, how come you always, or how come you never stuff. Just have today be a good day between us, and it's been working pretty good so far. And I think we'll keep that up. Speaking of Max, Max is the one who, she was an orphan, and she was raised by basically by her grandmother, who had 2 alcoholic sons. So Max grew up with 2 alcoholic uncles, and then she later on was raised by an aunt who was married to an alcoholic. And so there's all those alcoholics in her family, and none in mine. And you know, most people don't know how they got to be alcoholic. I'm alcoholic by marriage. It really isn't very funny. I wasn't alcoholic when I married her, and she drove me to drink for years, and I often told her so. And I wasn't an alcoholic, but I drank. Of course I drank. We live in a drinking society. You can't not drink, and you can't be a doctor and not drink. You can't any social events and not drink. I mean, you have to drink. But I wasn't one of those dumb alcoholics. But I did get a lot of morning sickness. And that concerned me. But I found out that was because I drank on an empty stomach. You should never drink on an empty stomach. It makes you sick. So I was careful not to drink on an empty stomach, and I still had morning sickness. And I found that was because I had mixed my booze. You should never mix your booze. It makes you sick. Then there were occasions when I didn't drink on an empty stomach, and I didn't mix my booze, and I still got sick. And I found out that was because I got some bad booze. There's a lot of bad booze out there. And God bless our AA research workers who go out and check it for me periodically. From what I hear, they're not making it any better than they ever did. I remember a specific instance when I went out one evening. We were drinking at the Royal Hawaiian, which is up by the Disneyland, and with a big circular bar, big circular bar. A lot of people sitting around that circular bar. And when you drink at the Royal Hawaiian, you drink rum. So we drank a lot of rum. And the next morning I was really sick. And I realized that must be rotten rum they use up there. It's amazing what the cheap rot gut rum they could serve at a place like that. And then the thought occurred to me, how come all those people sitting around the bar, how come they're so busy and have all those customers if they serve all that crappy, rotten rum? Well, just by looking at them, I could tell they were the alcoholics. A lot of alcoholics sit at that bar, and that's why they could drink that. And I wasn't an alcoholic because I drank good stuff. And that's it. I only drank the best stuff. So they were alcoholics and I wasn't. And I had other problems with my drinking. I also took a few pills, but never abused them. No, I didn't. In fact, I don't even know how you abuse a pill. I mean, well, how yourself? How do you abuse? How do you throw it up against the wall? You know, stomp on the thing, you know, or verbally abuse it. You dirty, rotten little pill. Why don't you do what I told you? I never abused a pill in my life. I was very respectful of my pills. They were just, they were just very tiny. Just to look at them, you could tell they were very mild, and I was very respectful where I carried my pills. I used to keep them over with my change, and people say, you got change for $1? And I say, oh yeah, and I go like that. And they say, oh, you carry Seconal and Tuanol around in the daytime. And because I took Seconal, Tuanol, Luminol, Amytal, anything at all, and so I switched over and put it over with my keys. And I'd go out in the parking lot and I'd take my keys out of the car, out of my pocket. And a Quaalude would run down the street, you know. And the damn thing would always run faster than I could run. You know. And I didn't dare stomp on it or I'd abuse it, you know. So I was very respectful of my pills. Never ever took a pill unless I had the precise symptom that only that pill would relieve. So every pill was medically indicated at the time that I took it. I either had the symptom or I could feel it coming on. So I wasn't addicted because I always took them according to directions. And took them under a doctor's orders, as a matter of fact. I remember shortly after I'd gotten sober, I found it hard to prescribe pills for people all the time. I remember a woman came to me. She was a new customer. She came in for a new patient. I'm also a pharmacist as well as that. So you have to forgive my Freudian slip there. Anyway, she was a new patient. Had a good checkup, and she made her next appointment and left the office and got home and remembered that she had forgotten to ask for her Doridan, which is a typical thing when, as all you pillheads will know, you go home and then call up and ask for your sleeping pills. And she asked for Doridan, and I told Max, who worked in the office, see, Max had, when I wanted to go to medical school, it was during the Depression, there was no money, and my family wanted me to stay home and run the drugstore. There was no money to go to medical school. So my solution to that was to marry the girl next door and suggest that she work my way through medical school. And in fact, when we did, and I got a medical degree, people weren't as impressed as I thought they would be. I thought they'd be more impressed if I had a specialty degree. So I said to her, "You're doing a good job, kid. You keep on working and we'll get us a specialty degree." And she did, and I did. I specialized in internal medicine, where you treat everything with pills. You don't do any surgery, can't stand the sight of blood. And you don't do any pediatrics, can't stand the kids, you know. So just treat everything with pills. And as a matter of fact, we built up a big practice, and a very ethical practice. I even had my own version of the Hippocratic Oath. I never ever gave a patient a pill that I hadn't first tried out on myself. And Max works with in fact, since Max had worked my way through medical school and all that, I thought the least I could do is let her work for me in the office for 29 years. And no salary, of course. So anyway, she was there, and I lost my train of thought. I don't know what I was building up, and I'm not going to ask you because you probably weren't listening either. And if you're lost, I'll remember it later on. Huh? Jordan, you were listening. There's a pillhead over here. They knew it. Thank you. Anyway, the gal called up and wanted her Jordan, and I told Max to tell her that no, she couldn't have that those were habit forming. And she says, "Well, that's ridiculous. They're not habit forming." She says, "I've been taking them for years, and they've never done anything to me." Which is typical. And anyhow, speaking of Jordan and pills, and I didn't really have a drinking problem or pill problem. I had a sleeping problem, and I had trouble getting to sleep. And I had started out in pharmacy school, as a matter of fact, at the end of a day of going to school all day, and then worked in a family drugstore all evening, and studying until midnight, 1, 2 o'clock. I'd go to bed, and then I'd be there half awake and half asleep, and in the morning I'd be both tired and stupid. I found out at the end of the study period I could drink 2 beers, jump in bed, sleep real fast, and wake up smart. And that's how I went through pharmacy school, graduated with honors, and then later on in medical school, and graduated third in the class there. And as long as I was sleeping and getting those doing well, it worked well. In fact, every chemical and drug and alcohol and drink that I took worked for me. It always worked. The problem was that it took more and more of it to do the work. And the good effect lasted for a shorter and shorter period of time, so it had to be repeated at increasingly more frequent intervals. And thirdly, after a period of time, each one, because the increase in amount, I guess, or whatever, it had side effects, which meant that I had to take some other drug to counteract the side effects, so I keep on taking the one that I was taking. So that better living through chemistry became more and more complicated. And eventually, I was talking about not being able to sleep. One time I decided I wasn't going to take anything to sleep. I just wasn't going to take anything at all. And I was going to see what happened. And what happened was that the next morning I had a grand mal seizure. And I thought to myself, well, I didn't drink last night, so alcohol had nothing to do with that. And I was under the care of the most prominent neurologist, convulsive disorder specialist in Orange County. And he didn't know why I had the convulsion. He didn't ask me if I drank, and I didn't think to tell him. And he was treating me with Dilantin and phenobarbital for epilepsy. And as a matter of fact, the first time when I had that convulsion, Max got all excited, and she called our doctor friend in the next block, and he came over and he called the ambulance, and they whisked me off to the hospital. And Max rode in the ambulance with them and got to the hospital. By that time I was awake, and I was on the staff of that hospital, of course, and I wouldn't stay unless they let Max stay with me. That speaks volumes. It was like the little boy having his tonsils out but had to have his mother stay in the hospital with him. But if you're on the staff of the hospital, that happens. I mean, if you have enough pull at the hospital, your spouse can act as your mommy and stay with you in the hospital. And And after that, I signed out of the hospital, went back to the neurologist to talk about. That's when we met the neurologist, and I told him it was all a marital problem. And Max was with me, and she couldn't figure out how she could cause me to have a convulsion. But if I said so, it had to be true, and he had to believe it. And so we went back home. I was taking Dilantin phenobarbital, and later on I had a second convulsion. And this time Max heard me back in the bedroom having a convulsion. She walked back there and she saw me on the floor convulsing. And she sat on the edge of the bed and she watched me. And when I got through, she said, "You've had a convulsion. You better go to bed." And she hadn't even been to AlAnon yet. Yourself. Anyhow, I ended up in the Mayo Clinic. They sent me back there to, let's see, what happened was, as an internist, I was a diagnostician, a specialist in diagnosis of what was wrong. And when the doctors had patients and they didn't know what was wrong with them, they'd send them to me for consultation. I'd do a history and a physical and a lab work and whatever needed to be done. And I would make a diagnosis and tell them what was wrong and how to treat them. And here I was losing weight, having convulsions, having high blood pressure, ulcers, high cholesterol, high uric acid, high abnormal liver function test, losing weight, had a sense of impending insanity. And I thought, my God, I need a good medical workup. I need to see a good diagnostician. Well, I happened to be the best diagnostician I knew. And I did some lab work on me. I did a bit of a physical examination, and I sat down and I had a consultation with me. And I had this weight loss, and I had headaches, and this high blood pressure, and a sense of insanity, and a sense of impending doom. And suddenly I realized it was obvious. I had a brain tumor, and I would die, and you'd all be sorry, by God. And so I was seeing this neurologist, taking the Dilantin phenobarbital, and he sent me back to the Mayo Clinic to the neurosurgeons to have them diagnose my brain tumor. And went back there, and I went through the tests for 9 days. And I went back the last day, to what I thought would be the last day, to get my lab reports and have them tell me that, yes, I do have a brain tumor, and it's not operable. And what happened was that the night before I went back for my last visit, Max snuck over there and told them that I was taking pills and a few other things to get to sleep at night. And when I went for my lab report, they said, "Well, there's one more thing we need to do. We need to have you see our staff psychiatrist." And I thought, well, that's a strange place to look for my brain tumor. But then I realized they had looked a lot of other strange places for my brain tumor. And so I said, okay. And the next thing I know, I saw the psychiatrist. Next thing I knew, I was locked up in the local nut ward of the Mayo Clinic. Which I guess is an okay, I'm sure it's an okay place. But if you have to go there and you have to go to the nut ward, don't go at Christmas time. This was Christmas of 1966. And they make you ice Christmas cookies. I remember the gal in white came to my cell and took me by the hand and walked me down the hall to the Christmas cookie icing party. And she steer my hand onto the icing and we smash it onto a cookie. I don't know how many cookies we crumbled before I told her what she could do with her goddamn cookies. And I went back to my cell where they treat me with... the reason I don't like Christmas cookies was when I was a little kid, my oldest sister had a real thing about Christmas cookies. I mean, a real thing about it. She had cookie cutters. I mean, she had Christmas trees, Santas, sleighs, angels, all kinds of Christmas cookie cutting crap. And she'd make all kinds of icings and all kinds of sprinkles. And then we'd have a Christmas cookie icing contest to see who could ice the prettiest goddamn cookie. And I did not like icing Christmas cookies when I was a little kid back in Alliance, Ohio. And I did not like icing Christmas cookies when I was a big shot doctor on the nut ward of the Mayo Clinic. And I signed out of that dump. I had a little trouble with you can't sign out of a nut ward unless you have somebody that's going to sign a receipt for you and take your responsibility for it. The only one there was Max, and she wasn't being very responsible. I finally had to threaten her that, by God, if she wouldn't sign me out, I'd never speak to her again as long as I lived. That got her. She has lived to regret her decision, but we went back to California. They treated me more respect. She called the doctor that gave me the Dilantin barbital, told him about a psychiatrist. He decided to have me see a psychiatrist there in Orange County, and went to see him. He talked to me for 45 minutes. He talked to Max for 10 minutes, and he locked me up in the local nut ward. They wanted me to make leather belts. Real fanatics on leather belts. Real fanatics. It's part of the program. I mean, I'm sure if they had a Senate investigation of that place, they'd find there people who have been there for years. They won't let them out until they make a leather belt or an ashtray or something useful. I wasn't going to make a leather belt because they were fanatics on it. They tried to tell me that it was improve the quality of my life if I learned how to make leather belts. You know, it was ridiculous. They didn't understand the philosophy. And besides, they didn't understand the instructions. This was the fault of that local occupational therapist. I mean, I always had a theory, if you don't understand a thing well enough so you can explain it to me, so I understand it, then you don't understand it as well as you're supposed to. And she had explained it to me 3 times, and I wasn't going to embarrass her by asking her a 4th time. And I remember sitting there in the nut ward, commiserating with myself at a series of mistakes and misdiagnoses and poor medical management. That a nice guy like me was in a place like that. And while I was thinking these things, this dumb psychiatrist who couldn't see that my problems were strictly marital walked up behind me and wanted to know if I'd be willing to talk to a man from Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought, God Almighty, don't I have enough problems of my own without trying to help some drunk from But I could tell by the look on his face that he thought it was a good idea. I don't know if you know that or not, but happiness on a nut ward is having a happy psychiatrist. And I was willing to go to any length to make him happy, and I said yes, and in no time at all, this clown comes galloping into the room, yelling at the top of his voice, "My name is Frank, and I'm an alcoholic." Ha, 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 ha. I was embarrassed for him. Meeting a perfect stranger, and the only thing he can think of to say about himself is that he's an alcoholic. Told an interminable story, went on and on and on. I have no idea what he said. But I know that he ended by saying, "Well, that's my story. I'm going to meeting tonight. Would you like to go along?" And I said, "Hell no, I won't like it. But I'll go." Because I figured he'd go back and squeal to that dumb psychiatrist, which I'm sure he would have. We went off to the meeting, and I don't know what meeting we were at. I don't know how many meetings we were at before I knew what meeting I was at. But I know that meeting had a profound effect on the psychiatrist. A very suspicious effect. I mean, suddenly he wanted to know, what's this about a book? What's this about steps? He said, what's this about meetings? How often do they have meetings? What other kind of meetings do they have? When are you going to meeting again? I thought, my God, I've got me an alcoholic psychiatrist. He's ashamed to go, so he's sending me. I had no idea how many meetings I'd have to go to before I could get him sober, but I decided I'd go to a meeting I could. I was after Frank take me every day. Frank was very good about that. He's going to take me every day. except Friday. He wasn't so sure he was going to take me on Friday. Thought he might have a date with his, later on became his wife, Carolyn. And I thought, well, that's a hell of a way to run an organization. And I reported him to the psychiatrist, who got another attorney to take me on Friday. And finally got enough brownie points, got discharged from the hospital. I had no intentions of continuing at meetings, but I was going to lie to the psychiatrist and tell him I was going. And but I had no intention of going back to the meetings. Why would I? I'm not an alcoholic. The problem was that Max enjoyed the meetings. I'd say, let's go to a movie. She said, no, let's go to an AA meeting. She thought they were funnier. But, of course, once I found out she really liked the meetings, I used that against her. If she wasn't going to shape up and behave the way I wanted her to, I told her I'm not going to go to AA anymore. I said that once too often, I guess. And, your AlAnons, be quiet now. And she did what she couldn't do. She got in the car and drove down. We lived in Anaheim, went to meetings in Laguna Beach, so we wouldn't run into anybody we knew. She couldn't drive to Laguna Beach. She was too far. She didn't drive the freeway. And she couldn't do that, but she did it anyway. She got in the car, and somehow she'd drive down to the meeting, go to the meeting by herself. Have you ever tried that? Sitting at home on a Saturday night, drinking, while your non-alcoholic spouse is off, laughing it up at an AA meeting? Yeah. I thought it was very rude. I had to go back to the meetings to see what the alcoholics were laughing about. It didn't make sense to me. They were laughing at things they ought to be ashamed of. Crying at things they ought to laugh at, Didn't make any sense. It took me 7 months. Went to meetings for 7 months. And went to one meeting too many and found myself laughing. And I haven't had a drink since. And that seems to be the way it's worked for me, that once we can laugh at ourselves and laugh at what we're doing, what we've been doing, then we get well. To me, the laughter is a very spiritual part of the program. In fact, I'm convinced that my higher power laughs every time he hears alcoholics laugh, even if he doesn't understand the joke. So there I am. 7 years, 7 months and 1 day. 7 months and one meeting too many. I'm a mild alcoholic, and I'm ashamed to be there. I was ashamed for the people out there to know I was here. I was ashamed for you to know I was here. I was ashamed to be in AA. I thought, seems such lowly goals. Because I've always had the best of intentions. I'm one of the best intentioned people you'll ever meet. I've always been very proud of my good intentions. In fact, for a long time I was going to be a saint. What do you mean, ha ha ha? I was very serious about it. I got Lives of the Saints, big book. Reading through it to find out which saint was going to be my role model. And in fact, I had a humility belt, and I got maybe that's where I got so much of my basic humility. I took a wide leather belt and I poked thumbtacks through it with the points in, and it wasn't the belt you wore to hold your trousers up. You put it underneath your clothes against your skin so that the tacks dug into you. And I got a lot of humility out of that belt because, the tacks go in, it would bleed. And you could feel the blood running down your legs. And if you left it on long enough, blood would collect in your shoes and you'd squish as you walked along, And I got a lot of humility out of that belt. I never wore it because it was painful, but that was a very good intention. And here I am. And I remember a time that a big, healthy, husky, young guy stood at the AA podium, and he said, if I don't drink today, I'm a success today. And I thought, oh, God's sake. Big damn deal, you know. He hasn't had a beer all day long. What a lowly goal that is, you know. Of course, that's the way you think when you're still drinking. A lot of that people talk that way, bragging about not having a drink. And I thought, geez, you know, I'd be ashamed to have anybody know that was all my goal was. But one day, eventually, it occurred to me that if this is such a bottom-of-the-barrel social organization, and that's such a crummy, little, cruddy chicken goal, how come I can't do it? You know, if I can't do the bottom line, if I can't do the simplest little stupid thing, if I can't succeed in that, nothing else is going to succeed. If I can't, that's the foundation. If that's the minimum requirement to making it in life for me. And if I can't do that, I can't do anything. Then it occurred to me that maybe I better succeed at that instead of poo-pooing it. And I'm looking at my watch, as you can see, and it doesn't mean anything. But it makes people feel comfortable. The reason it doesn't mean anything is that I do this all the time. I've talked for a blah, 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 blah for a period of time. And I look at my watch and I think, I wonder what the hell time I started. You know? It truly doesn't mean anything. Anyhow, I thought I was going to. Well, it seemed to me that the world is divided into two kinds of people: people who drink and people who don't drink. And the people who drink are divided into two kinds. There's 9 out of 10 of the people who drink react to alcohol one way, and they're called social drinkers. And 1 out of 10 react to alcohol entirely differently, and they're alcoholics. And the alcoholics are divided into two groups of people: those who are still practicing and those who are recovering. And it seems to me like the ones who are recovering are the ones that are having all the fun. And I decided I'd like to be in the recovering group, in the non-drinking group. Back in those days, they said a lot about stick with the winners, stick with the winners. They heard that a lot, stick with the winners. I thought, well, okay, well, if we're going to stick with the winners, we better know what a winner is. So I asked Chuck C., who at that time was sober about 100 years or so. And I said, what's a winner? And I expected him to come right out and tell me what it was, and instead he had to think about it for a minute. And I was surprised that he had to think about it. And then he said, well, I guess you have to die sober. And I thought, die sober. I mean, that's how I lost my sainthood. I found out you had to be dead a long period of time before they declared you a saint. I've never been enthusiastic about any accolades I could win by dying. And so I thought, well, if I can't be a winner, I'm going to be a successful member of AA. I decided that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a successful member of AA. Didn't say that to anybody other than myself. And over the years, I've kind of changed my definition of what a successful member of AA. Yeah. I'm glad to see you moving right along there, fella. I'm going to be a successful member of AA, and But the thing is, I changed my definition of what a successful member is to some extent, but I don't know any successful members of AA who drink or take drugs. And so that part's easy. And even to this day, if I have to, when I have to make a decision as to what course to take, what to do about something, I'll ask myself, what would a successful member of AA do? What would a winner do? What would God want me to do? Or what's the loving thing to do? All of which are basically the same answer. And in fact, my feeling is, if I do a thing, I try to live by this all the time. If I do a thing for the right motive and leave the results up to God, everything turns out the way it's supposed to. May not turn out the way I would have chosen. Very probably will not turn out the way I would have chosen, but it turns out the way it's supposed to. And the thing about that is, it makes life so simple, because I used to have to figure out, now if I do this, then you'll do that. But I can't trust you. You might not do that. You might do something else. So maybe I'll do this. I'm focusing all my attention on what to do to get you to do what I wanted you to do. Which is, I remember it was in an AlAnon meeting that a gal said, the more you try to control another person, the more you're under that person's control. Because if what you do next or how you feel next depends on whether or not that person does or doesn't do whatever you want them to get them to do, then you're under that person's control. And if you understood that, followed that, you're an alcoholic. Or even more likely an AlAnon. Speaking of AlAnon, I love AlAnon. I go to AlAnon, Laguna Beach, Monday noon AlAnon meeting every year. I've been going for years. I think it's wonderful stuff. I think it's great. I love AlAnon. And the AlAnon philosophy, and gives me lots of answers. And in fact, one of the most common things I see, one of the most common problems I run into among people I'm working with is an alcoholic going crazy in a relationship with another alcoholic. And I'll say, well, gee, that sounds to me like about 110% AlAnon problem. Why don't you go to AlAnon? And they're insulted. Now, here they are at the bottom of the social barrel, and they're insulted that somebody says they go to an AlAnon. And I find that happens a lot. I don't see any conflict between the two organizations, but a lot of people seem to think there is. How do I get out of that subject? I don't even know why I brought that up. I don't want to sound. I just love AlAnon. I just want to leave it at that. And so anyhow, I decided to, if I do a thing for the right motive and leave the results up to God, things turn out the way they're supposed to. And love is always the right motive. Love is always the right motive. In fact, the problem is that I think, okay, I'm doing it out of a motive that's love, but I have other motives too. Well, it's true. We usually have more than one motive, but I'm the one that decides what's my main motive. And so I can decide that and move on from that. In fact, I like the concept that some people who are authorities apparently on such things say that there's really only two emotions, only two basic emotions, love and fear. And all other emotions are variations of one of those two. And I like that concept because I look back on my life and I had basically a fear-based life before recovery. I did things because I was afraid not to. And a lot of things I wanted to do, I didn't do because I was afraid to do them. And today, I try to have a love-based life and leave the results up to God. And it's so much simpler. I love living by the steps. I don't always love doing the steps, but I love having done the steps, and I love living the life that the steps lead me. And every step I did In fact, if I wanted to be a successful member of AA, that was basically the thing to do. I found out I had to go to meetings, and not drink between meetings in order to stay sober. But as I did that, I watched other people who were going to meetings on a regular basis and not drinking between the meetings. And that's what they did, was go to meetings, and end up drunk. And I found out that if I want to stay sober, I not only have to go to meetings, I have to work the steps. And I kept doing that. I'd go into meetings and work the steps and staying sober. And then I watched people who went to meetings until they found out they had to work the steps in order to stay sober, work the steps, and then stop going to meetings and ended up drunk. And so I found out I have to go to meetings, work the steps, continue to go to meetings, and continue to work the steps. I mean, I have to keep on doing this stuff. It doesn't have any lasting value in that sense. People talk about doing it for insurance, but I think the insurance policy doesn't run very long. So I have to keep going to meetings and working the steps. And I particularly like each step that I did made the preceding steps mean more to me. When I took the third step, it made the first two steps mean more meaningful. When I wrote the fourth step inventory, it made the first three steps mean more to me. When I took my fifth steps, it made the first four steps mean more to me. Each step meant more than one. So now the steps are kind of like a circle rather than a step upward. And like the step 3 was just a decision. And now I kind of live by a combination of both 3 and 11. Sought through prayer, and I have to be careful not to say medication, to improve my relationship with God. I love the third step. It's been a lot to me all throughout my sobriety. I remember the first time I took the third step, I said the third step and the third step prayer on my knees in front of my sponsor. And third step prayer says, God, I offer myself to thee, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will, and so on. I did it on my knees in front of my sponsor, and I thought that's a contract. It's a contract between me and God. Well, I felt good after I did that, but I thought that's really awful easy for either me or God to get out of. Maybe it'd be more effective if we had more witnesses to this contract. So I went before my then 3 home groups, and I recited the third step decision and the third step prayer, on the theory that if either one of us tried to get out of that contract, we'd have to get all those witnesses together before we could do that, which probably is not legally correct, but at least I felt better. But then I thought, no, that's still verbal. That's like something in writing. If I'm going to have a contract with God or anybody else, I'd like a written contract. So I went to a business supply store and I bought a blank form for setting up a limited partnership. And I filled it out, and I gave God a 51% controlling interest in my life. And he became the general partner and I the limited partner. And I felt better, much better. But there was still one thing missing. I realized that shows that a limited partnership agreement exists, but it doesn't show what the agreement is. It doesn't show what the responsibilities of the different partners are. What's the difference between a general partner and a limited partner? You have to sit down the conditions of the thing. So one last thing was I took a piece of paper and drew a line down the middle. On one side I put down what's God's responsibility, and what's my other side was what's my responsibility. And basically what it came down to was that God's in charge of worry, and I'm in charge of work. And he doesn't like for me to even help him with he doesn't like for me to even help him with the worry. And he never does a damn bit of the work. And so I tell him, I said, I'll pedal and you steer, and for God's sake, watch where you're going. But I'm sick of some of the places that we've been. In fact, I remember the first time I told God, I said, you take this day, and you make happen whatever you want to have happen. And you have come into my life, whoever you want to have come into my life, And you have them say whatever you want them to say, have them do whatever you want them to do. And whatever happens this day and whoever comes into my life, whatever they say and do, I'll know that's your will for me this day. Now you go, have a good day. If you have a good day, I'll have a good day. And you know, I thought back and I thought, my God, I wonder how he's going to handle all the power I just gave him. But this is 31 years later, and he hasn't abused the privilege yet. So he hasn't screwed it up. Every day has been pretty much the way it's supposed to be. And my job is to accept it. I remember one day I was thinking to myself, I wonder what a graph of my life would look like. Somebody showed me a computer program that makes graphs out of all kinds of data, and I thought if I had a giant computer and had all the facts of my life, what would the graph look like? I came to the conclusion it would be like a giant V, like the Jelinek chart, actually. My life started way, way over there. And from there until July 31st, till Christmas of 1960, anyway, from where it started until July 31st, 1967, it was on a downhill course. Now, it wasn't a straight line down, it was up and down, just enough ups to keep me confused. It came down and ended up in the nut ward of the hospital I was on the staff of, and that wasn't bad enough. I had to go to AA. And on July 31st, 1967, I accepted the fact that I, of all people, strange as it might seem, even though I had no choice in the matter, I really was a mild alcoholic. Almost a non-alcoholic. And you know, I haven't had a drink since that day. And my alcoholism has been getting worse and worse and worse. You know? But when they talk about being a progressive disease, they're right. It's a progressive even in sobriety. But the nice part is that recovery is progressive too. And my life's been getting better and better and better than it ever was. Today it's higher, much higher on this side than it's ever been on that side. And this is the best life I've ever known. And again, it's not a straight line up. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. And when it goes down, there are all kinds of things I can do to get it to go back up again. I mean, I can read the book, work with newcomers, call my sponsor, go to more meetings, start a new meeting, just 1,000 things I can do to get it to go back up. Or I can do the simplest of all, not drink and sit still and wait. And this too, that's the one, it's like Winnie E. used to say, it's the only Bible quote she ever used. She said, the Bible says, and it came to pass. So the Bible doesn't say, and it came to stay. You know, if I just hold on, don't drink, it'll get better, and it does. In fact, I'm convinced, my experience is, that that's what, with people like us, when we hurt, we either drink or grow. If we drink, things get worse. If we don't drink and hold on, we grow spiritually. We're stronger after it's passed than it was before it started. That's how we get. That's how we make progress. That we're never spiritually the same after a problem. We're either better off or worse off. And so anyhow, my life's getting better and better. The point I wanted to make, though, and then I'll sit down, is that at the point of that V, you know, as smart as I am, and as good looking, what took me so long to accept the obvious fact that I really, really, really was a mild alcoholic? You know, and the only answer I can come up with, and I think it's the correct one, was that I had confused acceptance with approval. I thought if I accepted something, that indicated that I approved of it. And I find that approval has absolutely nothing to do with acceptance. It's an impediment to acceptance. In fact, I thought that accepting the fact that I was an alcoholic meant I had proved to be an alcoholic. There was nothing I could do about it. The thing is, until I could accept my alcoholism, until I could accept it, there was nothing I could do about my alcoholism. And yet, once I accepted it, that was empowering. Then I had choices. Then I could do something about it. There's a lot I could do about it once I accepted the fact that that's really what the problem was. And I find that's true of life. Anything that's happening in life, if I don't if I don't approve it, then and therefore won't accept it, it keeps getting worse. And it continues to get worse until I finally go, oh, crap, accept it. And I may begrudgingly accept it. If I accept it, then things start getting better and there's something I can do about it. And it's been the answer to me steadily to accept life on life's terms. And so glad that I found that. And I wouldn't have any of this if I hadn't been an alcoholic and was forced to do these things, the steps and all this, in order to stay sober. In order to be sober, I had to do these things which have changed my life so dramatically. So it's better and better than it's ever been. So I'm not only an alcoholic, but I'm glad to be an alcoholic. I love being an alcoholic. It's the best life I've ever known. If you don't understand that, that's too damn bad. Ask your sponsor. If your sponsor doesn't understand it, get a new sponsor. Yeah. I can't. So I'm an alcoholic. I'm not proud to be an alcoholic. I mean, how could I be proud to be an alcoholic? How could I be proud for something I have no responsibility for? I had nothing to do with. I didn't make myself an alcoholic. I never in my life decided at one point, I think I'll become an alcoholic. I had nothing to do with being. I can't be proud for something I had nothing to do with, but I'm certainly not ashamed to be an alcoholic. Why should I be ashamed of it? I had no choice in the matter. But neither proud nor ashamed to be an alcoholic. But I'm very proud. Very proud. I'm very proud indeed. Very proud indeed to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that's just terrific. I thank God for AA, and I thank AA for my sobriety. Thank you all very much. Love you.
We thank Paul one more time, please.